Welcome to Talk Treatises.
It is good to be here.
Today, we are not just reading poetry. We are stepping into a cathedral. But I don't want you to visualize the flying buttresses of Notre Dame or, the dome of St. Peter's.
Okay.
I want you to picture a cathedral constructed entirely of palm trees, vast ocean waves, and that terrifying hollow silence that follows a shipwreck.
A cathedral of the wild, essentially.
Exactly. We are guiding you today through a text that, on the surface, appears to be a standard romantic adventure poem from the early 19th century. It is titled The Isle of Palms, written in 1812 by John Wilson.
Right.
Now, if you just glance at the title or the date, you might think we are in for a bit of light escapist literature, maybe some, flowery descriptions of beaches and sunsets.
Sure, that's the immediate impression.
But looking at the stack of research we have here, this work is doing some extraordinarily heavy lifting, isn't it?
It really is. And it's a deception that Wilson is, I think, quite comfortable with. John Wilson is often remembered in literary history as a critic, a magazine writer, the man who was the driving force behind Blackwood's magazine under the pseudonym Christopher North.
A very sharp-witted guy.
Oh, a man of sharp wit and even sharper critiques. But this specific work, The Isle of Palms, is his manifesto. While it is formally poetry, it rhymes, it has meter, it uses stanzas. If you look closer, as we're going to do today, it functions as a systematic treatise on natural theology.
Let's pause on that term immediately, natural theology, because that concept is going to be the engine driving this entire conversation.
Yeah.
This is distinct from what we might call revealed theology.
That is the crucial distinction to make right at the start. Absolutely. Revealed theology is what you get from a holy book, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, or from, ecclesiastical tradition.
So it's handed to you.
It is. It relies on a text, a prophet, or a priest to tell you the specific attributes of the divine. It is information given to you from the outside, so to speak. Natural theology, which Wilson is championing here, argues that you don't necessarily need the book.
You just need your eyes.
You need to look at a mountain, you need to look at a storm. The idea is that the creator's personality, his laws, and his intentions are stamped directly onto the physical fabric of the creation.
So the world isn't just a stage for us to live on. It is a text we are supposed to read.
Precisely. It is the book of nature. But Wilson takes it a massive step further than most natural theologians of his time. He isn't just saying nature proves a creator exists in the way a watch implies a watchmaker. That's the classic William Paley argument.
Wait, the teleological argument.
Exactly. Wilson is arguing that nature is an active moral agent. It is a force that can recognize innocence, specifically human innocence, and decides to protect it.
That is a bold claim. It sounds lovely, the idea that the trees are looking out for you, but when you really peel it back, it implies a physics of morality that is actually quite controversial.
Oh, deeply.
And we're going to explore how he builds this mission, this attempt to construct a theology of innocence protected and the sacramental nature of the wild. And to do that, we have to look at the date on the cover.
1812.
The context changes everything. If you read this as just like a vacation poem written in peacetime, you miss the entire point. 1812 is not a calm year.
No, 1812 is chaos.
It is the absolute height of the Napoleonic Wars. The text itself explicitly references the wicked king, that is Napoleon and rumors of wars.
You have to imagine what that felt like.
You really do.
Yeah.
You have to understand the deep existential anxiety of the average Briton in 1812. The entire civilized world is on fire. Governments are toppling, borders are being redrawn by gunpowder, and there is a very real fear that structure itself, civilization itself, is collapsing. So Wilson is writing this during a time of total global chaos.
Yeah.
And his solution isn't political reform. He doesn't say, vote for this guy or sign this treaty or even defeat the French.
No, his solution is a retreat, but not a cowardly retreat. It's framed as a strategic spiritual retreat. He argues that we need to turn to the mountain monarchs and the silent glens.
Get out of the cities, get out of the political sphere.
Exactly. He posits that the political chaos, Napoleon, the wars, the blockade, these are just temporary instruments in God's hand. He uses a very powerful analogy of an earthquake to make this point.
Which is terrifying in its own right. I mean, an earthquake isn't exactly comforting.
It isn't, but think about the timeline Wilson asks us to consider. An earthquake might shatter a mountain. It looks like the end of the world in the moment. The rocks are bare, the trees are gone. It's devastation.
Total ruin.
But give it 10 years or 100 years. Fresh verdure grows on the naked cliffs. The birds return. The flowers bloom in the fissures. Wilson is saying that political terror is the earthquake. It is violent, but it is temporary. Nature, and the God behind it, is the only thing that lasts. The greenery always wins in the end.
It's a perspective that requires you to zoom out significantly. I mean, way out. And to make this argument, he gives us what we might call a single-sentence thesis for the whole work.
Yeah.
If we had to boil the Isle of Palms down to one idea, it is this. Wilson argues that nature is not chaotic, and it is not indifferent. It is a conscious, benevolent instrument of God that actively recognizes and protects human innocence, serving as a church that supersedes any stone cathedral.
That is the core of it. And to understand why that was so revolutionary, or at least so distinct, we have to look at the theological landscape before this. Theology in the early 19th century was often very rigid. It was doctrinal. It was church-bound.
It was institutional.
Very. If you wanted grace, you went to the altar, you took the sacrament, you listened to the sermon. The structure was everything.
And Wilson moves the altar.
He moves it outside. He posits that a nameless stream or a lonely rock is a more effective conduit for grace than a pulpit. This is what you could call the theology of sentiment, where feeling correctly is equated with believing correctly.
What does that mean, feeling correctly?
It means that if you can look at a sunset and feel a profound sense of awe and gratitude, Wilson argues you have performed a religious act just as valid as, say, reciting the creed in a church. The feeling itself is the act of worship.
So let's get into the text itself, this narrative treatise. Because Wilson doesn't just write an essay, he writes a story to prove his point. The Isle of Palms is divided into 4 cantos, and it starts, appropriately enough, with the largest natural force on the planet, the ocean.
Canto 1, the theology of the ocean. This is where he lays the groundwork. Wilson doesn't just describe the water as H2O or a shipping lane. He calls it a world of waters with a steadfast heart.
A steadfast heart.
Right away, he is personifying the elements. He attributes moral qualities, steadfastness, heart, intention to the sea. This isn't just a setting, it's a character in the drama.
And sailing on this moral sea is a ship called Hope.
The naming is not subtle.
No, it is not. Wilson wants to make sure we don't miss the allegory. And on the Hope, we have our protagonists. We have Fitzowen and Mary. They're young, they're beautiful, and they are in love.
Standard romantic leads, you might think.
At first, yes. But Wilson spends a lot of time telling us about the quality of that love.
He labors over this point. He describes their love as vestal fire. That's a reference to the Vestal Virgins of Rome keepers of the sacred eternal flame.
It's a very specific, very pure image.
Very. He says their love is sinless. He goes to great lengths to establish that these two are not just regular passengers. They are the elect of this natural religion. They possess innocence with a capital I. This is crucial because, in Wilson's system, innocence is a form of armor.
And that armor is about to be tested. Because we have the argument of the ship, and then we have the crisis of providence, the shipwreck.
This is the moment where the philosophy hits the hard reality of suffering. Wilson describes a ship carrying 500 souls. It is a massive vessel. It is sailing under a beautiful moon. Everything seems perfect. And then, in an instant, a hideous crash like thunder. It strikes a hidden rock.
And 500 people die.
Immediately. The ship is gone in moments.
This brings up the classic philosophical problem, doesn't it? Theodicy, the problem of evil. If God is good and nature is his instrument, why kill 500 people? And specifically, why does the moon, which represents providence here, let it happen?
It's the central challenge to his entire thesis, and Wilson knows it. He struggles with this. He doesn't shy away from the horror entirely. He describes the moon providence as having a heavenly visage that hides a cruel heart.
So he admits the cruelty.
He does, through the narrator. The narrator actually challenges the moon, asking, where did Stell linger then? Why did you withdraw your light and let them hit the rock? It's a moment of accusation, of real doubt.
It seems cruel. If nature's a moral agent, it just committed mass murder.
It does. But Wilson offers a resolution, a theological pivot that is, well, fascinating, if a bit chilling. He argues that for the crowd, the 500 sailors and passengers, death is just a transition.
He dismisses it.
Almost too easily. He says they, far off in the sunshine, dies like a wave of the restless main. He treats their lives as temporary waves that just crash back into the ocean of eternity. There's almost a sense that their lives were less significant.
That is easy to say when you aren't one of the 500 drowning in the dark.
Exactly. It implies a hierarchy of souls. Because for the innocents, Fitzowen, Mary, and a little child they have with them, the ocean behaves according to a completely different set of physics.
It saves them.
It does. While 500 drown in this hideous crash, the ocean becomes a liquid gold preserver for the lovers. They float, they drift, they find a small boat that has miraculously survived. It is miraculous survival.
And Wilson is explicit about why.
He's explicit that this survival is not random chance. It is a direct result of their virtue. Their vestal fire of love made them buoyant in a metaphysical sense.
Which brings us to Canto 2, the miracle of survival. And there's a really strange moment here. Fitzowen wakes up on a rock. He thinks he's alone. He thinks Mary is dead.
And he sees a ghost.
Right. He sees her standing there, pale as a spirit. And for a moment, he believes she's an apparition, that she's come back to haunt him.
This is crucial to Wilson's argument. He treats her survival as a literal resurrection. When Fitzowen realizes she is alive, the text says the faith of a lonely soul is sublime. It isn't just that she didn't drown, it is that she was given back to him by the ocean because of their virtue. It is a transactional miracle.
Faith is rewarded with a physical resurrection, in a way.
In a way, yes. But the real MVP of their survival, the one who really seems to be generating this protective field, is the third passenger, the child.
The child of heaven.
This is perhaps the most important part of Wilson's mechanism of safety. The text argues that the child's innocence acts as a shield for the parents. Nature cannot harm the child because the child is native to the divine order.
Let's unpack that. What does it mean to be native to the divine order?
Think about the romantic view of childhood, like Wordsworth's idea that children come trailing clouds of glory. An adult has been corrupted by society, by commerce, by sin, by the wicked king. But a child is pure, uncorrupted creation.
Like a piece of raw nature itself.
Exactly. The child and the natural world are of the same substance. Wilson argues that the god of the hurricane and the god of the calm are both subdued by the presence of absolute innocence. The storm recognizes its own kind in the child and refuses to strike. The waves recognize the child and grow calm.
So, if you're ever on a sinking ship, find a toddler. That is the tactical takeaway here.
In Wilson's universe, yes. That is literally the safest place to be. You stand next to the innocent, and their field of protection covers you. It's a fascinating, if scientifically questionable, theory of survival.
So they drift away from the rock, protected by this force field of innocence, and in Canto 3 Day, they land on the titular Isle of Palms. Now, usually in a shipwreck story, think Robinson Crusoe or Castaway, this is where the real struggle begins.
The battle for survival.
Right, you fight for food, you fight the elements, you battle madness and despair.
But Wilson rejects the Robinson Crusoe model entirely. He presents what you could call the Edenic argument. The island isn't a place of struggle, it is a fairyland. It is paradise. The moment they land, nature provides for them. There are fruit trees, fresh water, gentle animals.
There's no conflict.
Zero. Because they are innocent, nature rolls out the welcome mat. They build a sylvan bower.
Which is effectively a church.
It is their church. And Wilson is systematically rejecting society here. He argues that the world of men, cities, governments, economies, even organized religion is unnecessary for spiritual fulfillment. In fact, he suggests it's a hindrance.
A corruption.
A total corruption. If you want to know God, you don't need a library of theology. You need a grove of palm trees. You don't need a sermon. You need to listen to the wind.
They have their own natural liturgy.
They do. He describes how they observe the Sabbath. But how do they do it? They don't have a priest. They don't have a Bible, or at least they don't rely on it as their primary source. They listen to the mellow thunder of God's voice in the solitude.
The thunder is the sermon.
Yes. The birds and the wild deer become their congregation. It's a complete replacement of the ecclesiastical structure with a natural one.
There's a line I love in this section. God looks down with a gleam of grace on the stillness of her heavenward face. It's about Mary, just being quiet on the island.
Yes. Wilson is positing that isolation purifies the soul. This is contrary to the classical Aristotelian view that man is a social animal, that we need the polis, the city, to be fully human. Wilson says, no, true humanity is found when you strip away the polis and are left with just the creator and the creation.
It is a theology of subtraction, then.
A perfect way to put it. You remove the noise of civilization, and what is left is God.
But they don't stay there forever. And this is the tension of Canto IV, the return.
Right. If the island is perfection, why leave? Why would you ever go back to the world of the wicked king?
A British warship shows up, the St. George's Cross.
Which brings the rumors of wars right back into the frame. It's the symbol of the very society they escaped. The sight of the flag reminds them of the world they left behind, the world of Napoleon and conflict. And yet, they signal the ship.
Why? It seems like a mistake.
Well, Wilson argues that true piety requires a return to humankind.
You can't just stay in the monastery forever.
Exactly. You go to the wilderness, to the monastery, to the island to be purified, but you must return to the world to live out that purity. The battery is charged on the island. Now it must be used in society. You can't be a saint in a vacuum forever.
And the return brings us to the final theological point of the main narrative, which involves, of all things, the resurrection of the mother.
This was a twist I didn't expect when I first read it. They get back to Wales, 7 years have passed, and Mary's mother, who has, of course, been mourning them as dead all this time, is found alive.
And it's not just that she's alive. Wilson focuses on how she's been living.
He does. He dedicates significant space to what he calls the theology of grief. He doesn't portray her 7 years of mourning as a sad, wasted time. He describes the mother's grief as having made her beautiful and saint-like.
So the pain itself was a tool for sanctification.
That's precisely his argument. He argues that suffering is a beautifying agent of the soul. Her 7 years of agony were not pointless. They were a spiritual refining fire. When her daughter returns, the mother is a holier, more profound being than she was before the loss.
It is a very difficult argument to accept emotionally, that God allows us to suffer so we become prettier souls.
It's incredibly difficult, but logically, within Wilson's system, it fits perfectly. Sorrow creates depth. Without the grief, the joy of the reunion wouldn't be as sacramental. The pain gives the final joy its meaning.
So that is the main narrative. It's a complete arc. We have the shipwreck, the survival through innocence, the island utopia as a spiritual retreat, and the return to society, capped by this idea of sanctified grief.
A full theological journey in 4 parts.
But the Isle of Palms volume contains other poems, which I think of as minor treatises.
Yeah.
They take these same ideas, nature is church, innocence is power, and apply them to different, more domestic situations.
And these are vital because they show Wilson applying his philosophy to the real world, not just a fantasy island. Let's talk about the angler's tent. This is one of my favorites because it deals with the Sabbath argument again, but in a domestic British setting.
You have a group of friends, scholars, anglers, educated gentlemen, pitching a tent by a river on the Sabbath. They aren't in church.
No. And in 1812, in a religious society, that is a statement. That is nonconformity, people would have noticed. But
Right.
Wilson flips the script. He says the angler's tent becomes the new tabernacle. And instead of them going to the villagers' chapel,
So the villagers come to them.
the villagers come to them. It is like a reverse pilgrimage.
That's a great way to put it.
And what do they talk about? They don't just talk about fishing. They engage in novel converse and moral subjects. Wilson argues that the pomp of nature is superior to the pomp of art. Being in the tent, under the sky, listening to the river is a holier and more intellectually stimulating experience than being in a stuffy building made by hands.
He is validating the spiritual lives of those who find God in the outdoors rather than the pew. He's giving them a theological framework for their fishing trips.
He is, and the wicked king shows up here too. Even in the peaceful English countryside, Napoleon is present.
He haunts the edges of the text, doesn't he?
He really does. The shepherds and the anglers discuss him, and the shepherds have a very specific view, which Wilson clearly endorses. They believe Napoleon is an instrument in God's wise hand.
That goes back to the earthquake analogy from the beginning.
It does. It is a providential argument regarding history. Tyrants exist to test the nations. They are a scourge, yes, but they are a divinely appointed scourge. Eventually they will pass, just as the storm passes, and the fresh verdure of peace will return. It is a way for simple people and sophisticated poets to make sense of geopolitical terror without losing their faith.
There is the Hermitage. This one is a bit darker in tone. It is about a place called the Glen of Blood.
A great name. It sounds like a horror setting, and it was. It was a place of murder, a place with a dark history.
A place you'd avoid.
But Wilson argues for the sanctification of space. A holy hermit moves into this evil place. He brings one book with him, the Bible. And simply by living there, by being holy in that space, by praying there, he overwrites the evil memory of the landscape.
So a single holy individual can redeem a physical location.
That is the thesis. The hermit's goodness cleanses the glen. Nature smiles on the good. But there is a warning in that poem, too, a line that I think is key. All beauty dies with innocence.
What do you think he means by that?
It suggests that nature needs a righteous observer to be fully actualized. The beauty of the landscape ceases to exist in a meaningful, moral way if you remove the innocent person looking at it. The Glen of Blood is only a beautiful, holy hermitage as long as the hermit is there. Without him, it reverts to being just a place where something bad happened.
The consciousness of the observer is part of the equation. That connects to the theology of blindness in the poem Picture of a Blind Man.
Yes, it's the same theme of perception. Wilson argues that the loss of physical sight leads to a clearer apprehension of God's unclouded loveliness.
Spiritual vision versus ocular vision.
Exactly. The blind man sees the Spirit's temple unprofaned by tears. Wilson argues that our physical eyes often distract us with surface-level chaos, with ugliness, with the temporary. The blind man, forced to look inward or to sense the essence of things, actually sees the divine reality more clearly than those with 20/20 vision.
It fits his theme. The physical world is a veil, and we need to perceive the spiritual reality behind it, whether that's through innocence or, in this case, through a lack of physical sight.
Precisely. And finally, we have a very political poem on reading Mr. Clarkson. This is about the abolition of the slave trade. Thomas Clarkson was a leading abolitionist.
So he's taking his theology and applying it to one of the biggest political and moral issues of his day.
He is, and he frames abolition not as a political victory, but as a cosmic one. He calls it a holy warfare. He describes the abolitionists as constellated spirits fighting against the demonic forces of avarice and ignorance.
And he personifies the river Niger in Africa, which is a powerful move.
It is. He treats the news of freedom reaching the Niger as a cosmic baptismal event. He talks about Niger's sullen waves hearing the tidings. It's what you might call an ecclesiology of freedom. Wilson is arguing that the liberation of human beings is a sacrament that cleanses the natural world itself. The river flows differently, more joyfully when the people on its banks are free.
So if we step back and look at all of this, the shipwreck, the island, the tent, the blind man, the abolitionist, what is the synthesis? What is the logical machine Wilson is actually building here?
I think we can break it down into a logical structure, almost a syllogism.
Nature is the direct, unmediated expression of God's will. It is God's art, his loving book.
Okay, that's the foundation.
Premise 2. Innocence, specifically the innocence of children, virgins, and the pious, is the key, the password, that unlocks nature's benevolence. It attunes you to the frequency of the divine.
Right. It's the decoder ring for the book of nature.
A perfect metaphor. And so, the conclusion. Therefore, the innocent are safer in a shipwreck or a wilderness than the wicked are in a fortified city.
That is a radical conclusion. It upends our entire understanding of safety.
It is. It suggests that safety is a moral property, not a physical one. Your virtue is your shield, more effective than stone walls or a strong navy.
But surely there are objections to this. I mean, it sounds lovely, but reality seems to push back against it pretty hard.
Oh, there are massive objections, and any thoughtful reader at the time would have seen them. The most obvious is what we could call the sentimental fallacy.
The idea that he's just being overly sentimental about nature.
Exactly. Critics would argue, and have argued, that Wilson ignores the sheer brutality of nature. Nature, as Tennyson would later say, is red in tooth and claw. Wilson selectively portrays nature as a sleeping child or gentle nurse.
He conveniently ignores the shark that eats the innocent sailor, or the plague that kills the pious child, or the drought that starves the righteous farmer.
He does seem to cherry-pick his disasters, doesn't he? He constructs a world where physics bends to morality. In the real world, gravity pulls the saint and the sinner down at the same speed. Wilson tries to argue that metaphysically the saint floats.
And there is a class objection as well, right? I noticed this reading through it.
Absolutely. This is a very important critique. Notice who the priests of this nature religion are. They are the gentry. Fitzowen is an aristocrat. They're the scholars, the anglers.
The people with leisure time.
Exactly. The shepherds are often portrayed as passive recipients of their wisdom. The simple villagers come to the tent to listen to the rich guys talk about philosophy. It is a very aristocratic view of natural theology. It is easy to find God in nature when you have a tent, a picnic, and a week off. It is harder when you are working the field 14 hours a day, and nature is the thing trying to freeze you or starve you.
So the theology for the privileged, in a sense.
One could certainly make that argument.
Despite those objections, though, this work had a lasting influence on how people thought.
It did. It taps into something very powerful. It foreshadows muscular Christianity, the Victorian ideal that you should be a strong, outdoor-loving Christian. You see the roots of that here. The fusion of piety and ruggedness.
And the environmental connection seems obvious.
Oh, of course, environmental theology. The idea that nature is the art of God. Wilson is echoing Sir Thomas Browne there, but he expands it and makes it central. This influences how later generations view conservation. Saving a forest isn't just about saving trees or carbon sinks. It is about saving God's cathedral. It gives environmentalism a spiritual dimension.
It is a legacy that is still with us. We still feel that sense of the sacred when we walk into a quiet wood or stand on a mountaintop.
We do. And Wilson gave us a vocabulary, a theological justification for that feeling.
Now, before we wrap up, we have to do our thought experiments.
My favorite part.
Disclaimer time. The following scenarios are outlandish but plausible philosophical extrapolations for entertainment and educational purposes only. We are just playing with the ideas.
Let's do it.
Experiment 1. The Robinson Crusoe theocracy. Imagine Fitzowen and Mary never left the Isle of Palms. The ship never came. They stay there. They have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Generations are born on this island.
Okay, a lost civilization.
But remember, they have no Bible. They only have the oral tradition of their shipwreck survival and the environment around them.
So purely natural theology, no revealed text.
Exactly. The question is, based on Wilson's argument that nature is the book of God, would this island society develop a theology identical to Christianity? Or would the God of the hurricane eventually supersede the God of the calm?
That is a fantastic question. It's the ultimate test of his premise. If Wilson is right, if nature is a perfect mirror of the divine, then they should remain perfect Christians. They would read the book of the palm tree and understand grace, mercy, and resurrection.
How?
Well, the seasons would teach them about death and rebirth. The abundance of the island would teach them about provision. The peaceful animals would teach them about harmony. In theory, all the components are there.
But if he is wrong...
If he is wrong, and nature is actually indifferent or chaotic, they would likely become pagans. They would start worshiping the storm to appease it. They would sacrifice to the shark to keep it away. They would develop a sun god and a moon god. Without the special revelation of Scripture to guide the interpretation, the general revelation of nature might lead them to a theology of fear, not love.
So Wilson is betting everything on the idea that nature preaches the gospel.
He is, and I'm not sure anthropological history bears that out. Usually, isolated island cultures develop very, very different religions than the one Wilson described.
Okay, experiment 2, the moral barometer of physics. We are going to apply Wilson's physics of innocence to modern technology. In the poem, the ship sinks the crew but saves the lovers because of their virtue. The physical universe reacts to their morality.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Imagine a self-driving car. We program it with Wilson's theology. It is in an unavoidable crash scenario. It has to choose to swerve into one of two groups of pedestrians.
The trolley problem, but with poetry.
Exactly. Does the car scan the passengers and pedestrians for innocence? Does it run a quick background check and look for piety, beauty, youth? Does it save the child of heaven and hit the crowd?
If we accept Wilson's premise, it must. The car, as an agent of providence, should physically intervene to save the most moral character. If the car detects a vestal fire of love between two pedestrians on the left, it swerves to save them and hits the group of investment bankers on the right.
But that sounds monstrous to us, the idea of a machine making a moral judgment about who gets to live or die.
It does. It implies that we should be judging survival value based on moral worth, which is something most of modern ethics rejects. But if we reject that in the car, if we say that's a monstrous way to program a machine, we have to reject Wilson's central premise, that providence physically intervenes based on moral character.
You can't have it both ways.
You can't. If we think the car should just minimize casualties regardless of who they are or even act randomly, we are rejecting the physics of innocence. We are saying the rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. Wilson says, no, the rain falls gently on the just and drowns the unjust. Our gut reaction to the self-driving car tells us which universe we think we live in.
It forces us to decide if we really believe the world is a moral playground where virtue is rewarded physically, or if it's just a biological machine.
And that is the question that lingers long after you close the book. Do we live in a universe that cares about us, or one that just contains us?
Well, on that provocative note, we are going to leave you to ponder the morality of your own commute.
Indeed. Look at the trees. They might be watching you.
Thank you for listening to Talk Treatises.